Superboy and Robin, Jon and Damian. One was made to fight, and the other is an actual cinnamon roll who needs to be protected at all costs. Let's see if they can be friends. The story starts off at Jon's school. It's Christmas break and he's so happy to be leaving school. And it's also worth noting there's this bully making fun of Jon and his friend Kathy, and Jon just like totally ignores him. He's like stupid mature for his age. And when Kathy is like, oh, we should have punched him in the gut, Jon is like, bullies just aren't worth it. As Jon's walking away, he bumps into and knocks over a girl, and this girl's called Maya. Obviously, being a good kid, Jon helps her up, and Kathy's like, so are you new here? And Maya's like, nope, I'm nobody. I'm just running an errand for my brother. But after Maya goes away, she reports into someone, and whoever this person is knows that Jon is Superboy. Later that night, Kathy and Jon are riding their bikes, and Jon wants to head home by going through Dead Man's Swamp. I never said this kid was smart. Kathy's like, it isn't safe. I'm going home the long way, and leaves Jon alone, and Jon decides to explore the swamp and look for a Christmas tree. As he goes deeper and deeper, he inevitably gets scared. He eventually loses control of his powers and causes a massive fire. Then this massive moose demon thing appears, and then he's pulled up into the sky, and it's nobody riding Goliath. If you don't know about Goliath, Goliath is this bat dragon that belongs to Damian. That is a really complicated situation. Now, nobody basically has Jon's life in her hands. Apparently, the police force are already on their way to see what caused this fire. So if she drops him there, they're just gonna find a kid basically playing with fire. So she's like, what are we gonna do with you? And nobody's actually like, calm down before you blow our heads off. But when he sneezes, he manifests freeze breath for the first time. This freezes Goliath's wings and they are falling from a massive height. And when it looks like all is lost, Goliath is able to break free, grab both Maya and Jon, because it turned out that nobody is actually Maya, and they hit the ground protected by Goliath. Jon still passes out from this fall, and as he's waking up, he's hearing this voice talking about how his powers fluctuate based upon his emotions. When Jon finally opens his eyes, it's revealed that he's being tested by Damian Wayne. Turns out Damian has kidnapped him because Damian believes that Jon is a threat to every living being. He even says, the Justice League may have embraced you, but I will not. You haven't earned it. That's when Batman turns up and he is pissed. Turns out that someone hacked into the Justice League's central computer from Damian's lair. When Batman's like, so who did it? Damian's just like, nobody. When Batman's like, so tell me what this is about, Damian. Damian's just like, well, it's important to spy on the alien spawn when his father isn't around to restrain him. He's like, totally talking about Jon as if Jon isn't right there. But Batman knows it's only a matter of time before Superman turns up, and Superman is going to be on the warpath. Especially when the Justice League have already said that they will embrace Jon. And sure enough, that's when Superman turns up and he is angry and ready to tear everything down, to the point where Batman even has to pull out a kryptonite-infused batarang to defend himself. Jon actually tries to tell Superman that he's fine, but obviously at this point, neither parent is willing to listen. Superman is like, someone should teach your kid some manners, and Batman is like, someone should teach your kid control. And that's just kind of like, okay, that's both of your parenting philosophy summed up in one sentence. And that's when Jon panics and he sneezes again, and this breaks up the fight with a giant wall of ice. And Superman's just stunned because that's freeze breath. That's a major thing for his son to develop, and his son did it while he wasn't even looking. Superman even says he feels like he's missing Jon's major first steps. And Batman's just like, I missed a lot of Damian's first steps too. They were worst. And Damian's so proud of himself, saying, less ice, more blood. Also, Superman can totally see through Maya's cloaking device, so eventually he turns around and is like, so who's the ghost in the corner? So Maya introduces herself. Jon is like, she actually helped me when the fire went off. And then Maya's like, right, I've got to go off and feed Goliath. And the two of them are sort of making plans to see each other again, but Damian steps in the middle of them and is like, I don't think so. You two are not seeing each other again. And Jon just stands up, and here it's revealed that Jon is taller than Damian. This makes Damian super embarrassed because obviously for kids their age, being taller is a huge deal, and for Damian there's no way that this kid that's got no control over his powers could be taller than him. Back with the adults, it turns out that the blood tests Damian did on Jon are showing some abnormalities, and Batman actually wants to take Jon back to the Batcave to do further tests, and at first Superman's against this, but Batman actually points out that human equipment will be able to show up results that Kryptonian equipment probably wouldn't think of looking for. So back at the Batcave, Jon is still his optimistic self, the testing went well, Damian is still his salty self, and Alfred takes the two boys to go and see all of Damian's pets. But with Superman and Batman, the two of them are like really feeling the weight of being parents right now after seeing their kids interact like this, and both of them are like, do you think our dads had this many questions? And Batman's like, yeah. All dads do. Back with the animals, Jon is having a great time. He meets Batcal, he meets Titus, he meets Damian's cat. And Jon really wants to get along with Damian because he's like, I like animals too. You should bring them to the farm sometime and I can show you how to look after them properly. And Damian is like totally rude about this and says, whatever, try to restrain yourself from incinerating any more family pets, because Jon totally killed his mum's cat with his heat vision a few weeks ago, which he still feels terrible about. So he punches Damian square in the gut, and that's when the cat attacks Jon. Damian kicks him in the head and the dog bites him. And the cow is also there. The fight keeps on escalating and Alfred actually tries to break the two boys up, but Jon accidentally uses his freeze breath on Alfred. This just makes things worse. Damian grabs a kryptonite batarang. Jon tries to use his heat vision on Damian, but before the worst can happen, both the dads turn up and they are pissed. In their fight, the two boys totally wrecked the genetics lab, so their parents send them on a boot camp with all of their super gear taken away. The goal of this boot camp is to have the boys go all the way from a mountain back to Gotham by working together. It's only if they work together successfully that they get the right to be Superboy and Robin again. There's even a point early on where there's an avalanche and Superboy almost falls off the mountain and Damian totally doesn't help him and is like, your dad's probably watching, you wouldn't fall for long, I'm gonna fix things on my own. Jon manages to pull himself up and shortly after this they find their stuff again, but that's when Maya turns up and starts fighting the two boys. She's like, here are the rules, fight me and you'll get your badges back, and then you have to make your way back to Gotham, and you'll have 2 more challenges along the way. But during the fight with Maya, an avalanche happens because of Maya's sonics. Jon ends up losing control of his heat vision, which ends up making the avalanche worse, so they all end up being rushed off the mountain by Maya sort of using this broken off door as a makeshift snowboard. And after they land, Damian totally steals his badges back, steals a map, and steals 2 first-class tickets for a flight home. And after this, he just goes off on his own, without Jon. But that's when Maya and Jon have a moment, and Jon is like, look, I know what our dads are trying to do. And Maya's like, so does Damian, just give him a chance. And Jon just says that his dad tells him not to give up on anybody, and he goes running after Damian. And it's a good thing too, because while Damian was alone, he's like jumped on this train, Goliath has turned up and he's attacking Damian, and Damian has no way to control him. The two boys actually end up fighting Goliath independently, so they've both got the same goal and they're still not working together. Jon like jumps on Goliath's back and Damian's like, stop doing that, you're hurting him. But then there just happens to be a bunch of fish in the train that they're riding, so Damian ends up actually luring Goliath into this pit with all of this fish, because the only thing that's bigger than Goliath's ears is his stomach, and that's an easy way to control him. But Goliath ends up not being the only trouble, because when the two boys turn around, the bridge that their train is supposed to go over is gone. The train is going for this gap at full speed. Alfred actually wants to pull the two boys out of there because they are taking way too long to do something about this. Superman even flies in as the train begins to fall, and Damian is trying to get Goliath to obey him, but Jon is like, oh, I know, Crypto loves to play games. Hey Goliath, fetch! And he totally throws a fish at Damian, and the two of them fly off while clinging to Goliath. Now both Batman and Superman note that while both boys are really resourceful, neither of them have worked together at this point. They're just sort of working independently and it benefits each other. But then there's like this really sweet moment that night where the two of them are on Goliath's back and they share a granola bar that Jon had in his pocket, and Jon flat out says to Damian, "Do you want to be like your dad when you grow up?" And Damian's just like, "You talk too much." And Jon says, "I guess they want us to be brothers in arms." And Damian's just like, "Worse, they want us to be friends." But then there's just like this moment where they're looking at each other and they both just go, and it's so sweet. As they make it back to Gotham, they've got their final test. Superman is causing a hurricane. Jon naturally panics because he's never been in this situation before, but Damian knows what to do. He tells Goliath to take evasive maneuvers, but then Jon is like, "Yeah, Goliath, climb over it," which confuses Goliath because he's not used to getting two separate commands at once. So they end up getting trapped in the updrafts and falling. When the boys land, Superman is there and he lectures the two of them on working together, especially when the stakes are real. Superman then flies away and tells them that because they didn't beat one challenge, they'll have to talk about their futures as Robin and Superboy back at the Batcave. But when the boys get to the cave, the boys quickly find that these synthesized compounds of Batman's enemies from the genetics lab have all merged together into one giant enemy and is holding their dads hostage. It is worth noting that it's implied that this is just one of Batman's plans to force the boys to work together, but the boys don't know that. And for the first time, they're able to properly utilize Damian's abilities as a tactician and Jon's superpowers to save the day. And they save their dads and Alfred, and they think it's real. After the fight, Alfred makes the executive decision that even though the boys failed all of the challenges, they came together when it mattered the most. And so they have earned back their capes and by extension, the right to call themselves Super Sons. Back at Hamilton, Bruce, Damian, Jon and Clark have all gathered together and they're all cutting down a Christmas tree each, one for Jon and Clark's house and one for Bruce and Damian's gala that they're putting on. And the two men are basically patting each other on the back for raising good kids. Meanwhile, Jon and Damian are totally arguing about who should cut down what tree. Damian is basically like, "I can handle the big one myself, I'm more experienced at this." And Jon is like, well, I actually know a thing or two about, and Damian totally cuts him off, calls him Hickville, and he flat out just tells Jon that he's more experienced at this, but then Jon says that he should cut down the big tree because he's taller. And the two boys start fighting again and the dads look on. So very, very proud of their sons. And that's where the story ends. I really like this story. I love how Jon and Damian contrast each other perfectly, but not in the same way their parents contrast each other, because they're different characters and have different personalities. But it's also not dissimilar at the same time. Like, it's very clearly loosely based on the relationship that Superman and Batman have, but is distinct, if that makes any sense. This story is so much fun. I'm loving going back through Rebirth and giving so many stories that I flat out didn't like the first time a second chance because I'm in a much better mental place than I was when Rebirth first started. Like, I've already caught up on Super Sons. I totally had a Super Sons day the other day and expect a lot more Super Sons content because I have a lot to say on the matter. I almost wish this particular story though was longer than 2 issues. As much as I really did enjoy the story, like it's one of my favorite ones that I've read from Rebirth so far, it's so short and I just wish there was like one more issue where we could have had another challenge in there, obviously, where Jon and Damian actually do work together, but it fails due to Damian not getting to know Jon, and so he's not really familiar with the inconsistencies in Jon's powers, and by extension, Jon doesn't really know how to work with a tactician. I doubt he's ever worked with a tactician before, so I would like to have seen those two boys become familiar with each other's skills before they suddenly come together at the end. I think it would have just helped flesh out the story a bit. And plus, by having like a justification for their overall uncertainty, it would have made that final fight just that little bit more powerful. And also I have just like one teeny tiny gripe with the artwork right at the end where you see Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is supposed to be like super, super hot, like the hottest man you could imagine, that's Bruce Wayne. And he's just not that there whatsoever. And I'm just like, no, make him hotter. Maybe that's just me. Bring back hot Bruce Wayne, please. But overall, I really, really like this story because it's such a good jumping on point for both of these characters. Like, you don't need any prior knowledge of them. You just need to know One's Batman's son, one's Superman's son, go. And it works perfectly. Like, you don't need to know that Damian was raised by the League of Assassins. It's just not relevant, and it's all perfect. It's super effective! Okay guys, that is it for today. So do you want to see me cover more Super Sons? Please let me know in the comments down below. Also don't forget to thumbs up, subscribe, do all of my social links. Please check out my Patreon if you want to support the show, or I've got a PayPal donation link. Seriously, any donations help so much, and plus if you support my Patreon, you get early access. But for now, my name is Faust, this has been Exploring Comics, and it is super effective.